Mike, Vincent, Vincent.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Please tell us your occupation.
I'm with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I am an assistant supervisor of the crime scene unit.
How long have you worked for Orange County?
I worked for Orange County for 9 years.
Do you have experience working with other law enforcement agencies prior to Orange County?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I am a retired Philadelphia police officer. I did 21 years with the Philadelphia Police Department. I did 5 years in patrol, 5 years in narcotics, and my last 11 years was with the Philadelphia Police Crime Scene Unit.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your background and training as it relates to crime scene investigation?
I have a high school education in electronics. Right after high school, I entered the Air Force, and I served in the Air Force for 8 years in law enforcement. After the Air Force, I went to the Philadelphia Police Department, and while in the crime scene unit with the Philadelphia Police Department and with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I have attended over 30 crime scene related schools, some lasting 3 days, some lasting 2 weeks.
Okay. You indicated that your service at the Orange County Sheriff's Office is in some form of management.
Yes, ma'am.
As a supervisor?
Assistant supervisor, yes, ma'am.
All right. Would one of the individuals that you supervise be Gerardo Bloise?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it would.
Okay. In July of 2008, what was your position with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
I was assistant supervisor of Squad 20.
Okay. Including, at that point as well, Mr. Bloise?
Correct. He was in Squad 20 with me.
Did you assist him in processing certain aspects associated with a white Pontiac Sunfire?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did that assistance include taking samples of some sort from the vehicle?
Yes, it did.
All right. Can you just give us a general overview of the different types of samples that you collected from the vehicle?
I initially collected stain samples to check to see if there was any blood inside the trunk liner of the vehicle. I did 3 separate tests, one on each side and one in the middle, which came out negative. And I also collected air samples from the vehicle.
All right. Did you also collect pieces of carpeting from the trunk?
Yes, I did. On the spare tire cover, I collected a couple samples of the stain that was in the carpet itself and placed it in tin cans.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned taking air samples from the trunk.
Yes, ma'am.
Did the collection of air samples from the trunk begin on July 21st of 2008?
Yes, it did.
Were you assisted in that endeavor by individuals with the University of Central Florida?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury how air samples, how the process of collecting air samples began?
The first time we attempted to collect air samples, Dr. Michael Sigmund from the University of Florida, the National Center for Forensic Science, was assisting. He had a large syringe, and what he tried to do was insert it through the trunk seal rather than open up the trunk, because he was going to suck the air into the large syringe. We were unable to do that, so we cracked open the trunk as little as possible to get the syringe in there, and then closed the trunk, and he was able to suck out the air that was in there. He then transferred the air from the syringe into a plastic bag, a Teflon bag, I believe they call it, and he transferred the air into 2 bags. And he also hung a filter inside the trunk of the vehicle. After we were successful in getting the air out of there, we opened up the trunk and he hung a filter in there, and we closed the trunk again to see if the air would absorb into the filter.
All right. You observed this process?
Yes, he performed the process and I was there observing.
As a result of this endeavor, did you collect an item that was ultimately shipped to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee?
Yes.
If I may have JN for identification. Right there.
Nay.
May I put you?
Nay.
Let me show you what's been marked as JN for identification. Take a look at that packaging and tell me if you recognize it as something that you've had contact with in the past.
Yes, it is.
How do you recognize the item?
This is the label that I placed on the front of this envelope. This is our tape, our evidence tape that we sealed the envelope. This is my initials on the tape itself.
After the process that you described, did you take the toddler bag and place it into this envelope and seal it?
Yes, I did.
Did you also, at that point or the next day, take a sample from the stained area of the spare tire cover?
Yes.
If I may have IR for identification.
Nay.
Let me have you take a look at the item IR for identification. Tell me if you recognize it and how so.
Yes, I recognize this. Again, this is my label that I placed on this in this tin can of the item and identifying the item that's inside the can. And this is our evidence tape with my initials. After it's sealed, I initialed it.
Do you place a date on the seal as it relates to the collection as well?
Yes.
What date?
7/22. Are we?
That item in IR for identification in the can that I had just showed you, did you transfer that item to the Oak Ridge National Laboratories once you sealed it?
Yes, it was shipped there. Yes.
On July 23rd of 2008, did you conduct another effort to collect air samples from the vehicle?
I observed the collection. Correct. There was another attempt at collecting the air samples. Yes.
All right. How did this attempt differ from the first? What was the process used on that attempt on July 23rd, 2008?
What we did was, it was again done by Dr. Michael Sigmund. What we did was opened up the trunk. We hung in two different types of filters, a carbon filter and another type of filter, and we closed the trunk and let that in there for approximately, I believe it was 40 minutes. And then he opened up the trunk and collected the samples.
All right. If I may have JO for identification. This was the process that you observed?
Yes, ma'am.
Nay.
Have you take a look at the packaging of JO for identification? Tell me if you recognize the exterior, and if so, how.
Yes, I recognize this. Again, this is my label that I put on the front of the envelope. identifying what's inside the envelope. And this is my evidence tape with my initials on it again.
Does the seal where you placed your initials indicate the date that the item was collected?
No, it does not.
Okay. Does the front somehow have some indication on the label as to the date and time of collection?
The date, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what was the date on that item?
7/23 of '08.
Once that item is collected and sealed by you, is this another item that was ultimately transferred to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory?
Yes, ma'am, I believe that's the one that went to Oak Ridge in Tennessee.
On August 29th of 2008, did you conduct another examination of the trunk to collect samples from it?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. Prior to the collection actually occurring, did you receive equipment from another individual with instructions on how to do the collection?
Yes, I did, from Dr. Voss from the Oak Ridge Laboratories in Tennessee.
All right. What was sent to you for collection purposes?
What he had sent to me was a portable air pump, 9 test tubes, and instructions on how to collect air samples and where to collect the air samples from.
All right. Did you, in fact, utilize the materials sent to you by Dr. Voss in the collection of additional samples on Friday, August 29th?
Yes, ma'am, I
Or
did.
on August 29th and August 30th of 2008?
August 29th, I did air samples from the vehicle, and August 30th, I did air samples from the trash that was collected from the vehicle.
Explain to the jury how that process took place.
On the piece of equipment that he sent me, it was a square box approximately this size, maybe 9 by 12, and it was about 4 inches thick. It had 2 latches on the front, which the lid opened up. Inside was some switches and batteries. Coming out of the side of the box were 2 tubes, rubber tubes, and on the end of the tubes were a nut with threads on it, the female side of a nut. The test tubes that he gave me were approximately 2 3/4 inches long, about 1/4 inch thick. Each one of them had the male side of the nuts on each end. And what I was to do was to set up the equipment and then attach the test tube to the 2 hoses coming out, and then turn the pump on for a certain amount of time, and from each area that I did.
Now, you mentioned this process occurring in different areas of the vehicle.
Not only the vehicle, but the garage that the vehicle, our bay that the vehicle was parked in, I took air samples of the garage itself.
If I may have NF, NG, NH, NI, NJ, NK, NL, and NM for identification. I'll show you these items as a group. Have you take a look at all of them and indicate whether you've had some contact with the item in the past. And if you can keep them in order, that would greatly assist.
Yes, I recognize these.
How do you recognize them?
These are envelopes that I packaged each individual test tube in for shipping. My label is on the front identifying what's inside the envelope. The evidence tape on the back is our unit evidence tape. My initials are not on this particular envelope because what I did was placed all these into one single envelope, and I sealed and initialed the other envelope.
Let me start with the top item, which is NF for identification. If you could just identify the area where this was collected and the collection time.
This is from the passenger area of the vehicle, the interior side of the vehicle. It was collected at approximately 15:02 hours on the 29th of August.
How long did the collection process take?
I collected this item for approximately 69 minutes.
NG for identification, same questions. Can you tell us from where this sample was taken, when and how long the collection time was?
Again, this is from the passenger area of the vehicle, and it was 69 minutes. This was like I said earlier, there's two tubes that come out of the box, and I attached a trap to each tube.
NH for identification, where was that collection from?
This was from the trash found inside the vehicle, inside the trash bag. This was collected for approximately 72 minutes, and it was collected on August 30th, the next day, at approximately 13:28 hours.
And the length of collection time?
72 minutes.
NI for identification?
This one was collected from inside the trunk area. What I did was place the equipment inside the trunk, shut the trunk lid, and allowed the machine to run for approximately 69 minutes. And this occurred on the 29th of August at approximately 16:29 hours.
NJ for identification?
Again, this is from the trash that was collected from the vehicle. It was collected on, again, the 30th of August, and it started at approximately 13:28 hours, and it lasted for 72 minutes.
NK for identification?
This was a test that was conducted on the air inside our garage where the vehicle was located. I allowed the machine to run for 77 minutes, and this was conducted on August 30th, and it was started at approximately 9:03 in the morning.
And L for identification?
This is what we call a standard or blank test. What we do is the traps that were shipped to me were not used. This one was not used. It was kept in its container, and it was shipped back to Oak Ridge in that condition. And we do that so during shipment, if there's any contaminations picked up, then this one would be the one that would pick it up because it's a clean specimen.
And NM for identification?
Again, this was from our garage, the air that's in our garage. It was tested on August 30th at approximately 9:03, and it was tested for approximately 77 minutes.
After those items were collected and sealed in these envelopes, what happened to them?
They were shipped back to the Oak Ridge Laboratory, Dr. Voss.
On September 27th, did you collect items from the spare tire, or an item, from the spare tire wheel well and ultimately shipped to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Yes.
Okay, JM for identification. Take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it as something you've had contact with in the past.
I recognize this, yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This was there was a substance on the surface of the inside of the spare tire well. It was scraped and put in a plastic container, and it was shipped off to Dr. Voss. I believe it was, I'm almost positive this one went to Dr. Voss.
After the collection, you recognize the initials on the seal?
Yes,
And whose initials are those?
Gerardo Blazes.
Did you collect other pieces of the spare tire cover on October 30th of 2008?
Yes,
Did you also collect a section of the spare tire cover that was not stained?
yes.
What was the purpose of that?
Again, that's what we call for a controlled sample. It was an area of the spare tire cover that did not have a stain on it, so that could be analyzed.
Okay, if I may have IP and IQ for identification. Let me show you what's been marked as IP for identification. Have you take a look at this item and tell me if you recognize it as something you've had contact with in the past?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Again, this is my label identifying what's inside the can. This was placed in here on October 30th at approximately 16:30 hours. It was sealed with evidence tape, and my initials are on the top of the tape.
After that item is collected, is it shipped to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee?
Yes.
Let me show you IQ for identification. Tell me if that's something that you recognize as having had contact with in the past.
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Again, this is my label on the front, identifying what's inside the can, and this is not taped. I do not have evidence tape or my initials on this one.
Okay. What is that one identified as?
This is identified as a 2.5 by 2 piece of stained spare tire cover.
The other item was identified as
A 6-inch by 6-inch piece of stained spare tire cover.
which was the item that was the control sample?
The second one, the small one.
The smaller piece?
Yes.
Did you also assist Mr. Bloisey in other aspects of the crime scene investigation?
Yes.
Okay. Would that have included taking standards of hair and DNA from George Anthony, Cindy Anthony, and Lee Anthony?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were the standards taken from George and Cindy Anthony on October 7th of 2008?
I believe that was the date, yes.
The standards from Lee Anthony, were those taken on October 8th of 2008?
Yes, ma'am. The next day, I took them from Lee.
If I may have items IW, IX, IY, IZ, JA, and JB for identification. Are these samples collected in identical fashion?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. Are these samples collected in identical fashion from each individual?
Yes.
Okay. How is it that the DNA samples are collected from each of these individuals?
What we done was we took them into a room where we collect samples, and I collected the buccal swabs and then collected the hair swabs, or the hair samples from them. They either assisted me in retrieving the hairs themselves, or I collected the hair.
All right. How was the buccal swab collection done? How do you do that?
What's done is we take 2 Q-tips and we swab the inside of the mouth to get the skin cells that's inside, located inside your mouth. We swab each side, and then we place them in boxes and seal them and ship them.
Okay. And the hair samples that are collected, are those pulled or otherwise shed?
No, they're pulled hairs.
All right. And how were those collected? You indicated that sometimes the individual will assist you.
Yes. If I collect them, I'll use tweezers. Sometimes I'll give the individual that is I'm taking the sample from, I'll let them use the tweezers, or they'll just pull the hair out with their fingers.
Okay. What happens to the item after they're collected?
It's placed in a clear plastic Petri dish, a round dish, and then it's sealed.
All right. If I may approach the witness with JB, IY, and IX for identification.
You may.
Take a look at each of those items and tell me if you recognize them as something that you've had contact with in the past. And then we'll do them individually.
Yes, I do recognize these.
What do you recognize IX to be?
These are 2 buccal swabs taken from Cindy Anthony.
Once they are collected from Mrs. Anthony in the manner described, do they go into that packaging?
Yes, they're in a box. The box actually gets sealed, then they're placed in this envelope, and this envelope is sealed with my initials.
IY? What do you recognize that to be?
This is 2 buccal swabs collected from George Anthony.
Once those items are collected in the manner described, do they go into a sealed box, into a sealed package?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
And JB for identification?
These are 2 buccal swabs collected from Lee Anthony.
Same series of questions. Once they're collected from him, do they go into a sealed box in the sealed package initialed by you?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
All right, I'm going to show you IZ, JA, and IW for identification with the court's permission.
Okay.
Do you recognize each of those items as something you've had contact with in the past?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What do you recognize IZ to be?
This is one Petri dish containing hairs from George Anthony.
Once those items were collected, were they placed into the Petri dish, sealed, placed into the container, sealed, and initialed by you?
Yes, they are.
JA for identification.
This is one Petri dish containing hairs from Lee Anthony.
Once those were collected, were they placed into the Petri dish, sealed, placed into the envelope, sealed, and initialed by you?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
And IW for identification.
This is one Petri dish containing hairs from Cindy Anthony.
Once collected, is the Petri dish sealed, placed into the envelope, sealed again, and initialed by you?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
On August 1st of 2008, did you respond to the Anthony home at 4937 Hope Spring Drive and collect items described as gas cans?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
All right, if I may have AJ for identification. Sir, do you see AJ for identification displayed on the monitor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what do you recognize it to be?
This is one of two gas cans that I collected from the house.
Okay, how is it that you can recall the collection date and time?
Located in the picture is a identification card, and the card has my name, the case number, the time, and the date.
Is that photograph a fair and accurate depiction of that item on August 1st of 2008 at 11:30 hours?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce AJ for identification into evidence.
No objections.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Permission to publish 107 to the jury, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Investigator Vincent, is there anything that you did to change or alter the appearance of the gas can from the time that you collected it at the Anthony residence until the time of the photograph?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Okay. What happened to this item after you photographed it?
What I did was I swabbed the gas can for any DNA, and I also conducted a latent examination on the gas can to see if I could get any fingerprints off the gas can.
Were you successful?
No, I was not.
Was the item returned to the Anthony family on Hope Spring Drive?
Yes, it was.
When?
I'd have to look at my report.
Your Honor, may the witness refresh his recollection with his report as to the time he returned the item.
Yes, you may.
If I may refer you to page 5 of your report above the date of, above the August 12th date. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
And when was that item returned?
August 13th at 11:03 hours.
To whom?
Cindy Anthony.
Your Honor, at this time, I would seek to introduce IW, IX, IY, IZ, JA, and JB for identification into evidence identified by the witness as hair and buccal swab standards.
What says the defense? You may.
No objection.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
IW becomes exhibit number 108, IX becomes exhibit number 109, IY becomes exhibit number 110, IZ becomes exhibit number 111, JA becomes exhibit number 112, JB becomes exhibit number 113.
What, may I have a moment?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Those are all the questions I have of this witness at this point.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vincent.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sir, when you did the process the car on July 17th of 2008, and you checked for blood, you testified about that, correct?
Correct.
And while you were doing that, that was caught on television, was it not?
The Bay Area was on television, and the vehicle was on television, but the collection of the blood or attempt to see if there was blood inside the car was not on television.
What happened was you were processing the car that evening,
Correct.
and you had the garage door open,
Correct.
and you and Mr. Bloisey were processing the car with Blue Star.
That was one of the processes we did. Correct.
And there was a television crew filming you while you were doing this.
Correct.
And you could see their lights from their cameras because it was at night, could you not?
I don't believe they had lights on at that time.
Did you call the media so they could film you?
I did not call the media.
Do you know who did?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the relevance.
Sustained.
Are you aware if it was the intent to have the media film you while you processed the car?
It was whose intent?
Whether it was
I'm going to object if he's asking him as to someone's intent other than his own.
Sustained. Rephrase your question.
This was immediately broadcasted throughout the country, was it not?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
The samples that you were talking about with the air this is the very first time you've ever taken air samples, correct?
Yes, sir, it was.
In fact, you have no training whatsoever in the collection or preservation of air samples.
This is the first time I ever heard it being done. That's correct.
And you had never heard of this ever being done in any cases prior to this one.
That's correct.
And this for you was somewhat of an experiment.
It was new. I wouldn't call it an experiment.
Okay. Mr. Sigmund, that came and took the samples that you witnessed, this was the first time he had collected air samples, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
If you're aware.
This wouldn't be based on anything other than hearsay.
Sustain.
There were multiple attempts to try and collect samples, right?
Yes.
Just couldn't seem to do it correctly.
No, that wasn't the case at all.
You weren't sure if you were doing it correctly.
No, that wasn't the case at all.
Okay. It was the first time you were doing it, but you were certain you were doing it correctly.
Which time are we talking about?
Multiple times. You have the 17th and the 23rd, correct? You did it on?
The 17th of
July?
and the 23rd of?
July?
They were not attempted by me at all. They were done by Dr. Michael Sigmund.
And is it your understanding that they were being done correctly, or they had to come back and try something new?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Any response will be based on hearsay.
Sustain.
You were part of this process, were you not?
I observed the process, correct.
And there were multiple methods employed in trying to collect air sample, were there not?
There were different types of filters used to collect the air sample, yes.
First, there was the syringe.
Correct.
Then there was the little carbon filters.
Correct.
And then after that, in August, you got sent a pump from Mr. Voss.
And that is the sample that I collected, correct.
Right. Now, the difficulty that you had is in collecting air samples is that air is a free-flowing thing, is it not?
Air is free-flowing, but I don't understand what you mean by difficult.
Okay. Well, let me rephrase it let me put it this way. The air in the garage of your forensic bay was not the same on July 16th as it was August 29th, was it?
It wasn't the same air. Whether it was the same quality of air, I couldn't tell you that.
Right. And that's because you open the garage door, air comes in and air goes out.
Correct.
And that's the same thing with this car, correct?
Correct. The air would leave and the air would stay, yes.
You don't have any information as to the air in this car on June 16th, correct?
Correct.
And you don't have any information as to the air in the garage of the Anthony family.
Correct.
And you certainly didn't do any samples of the garage in the Anthony family home.
That's correct.
And furthermore, at the tow yard where this car was for 3 weeks, you didn't do any samples of the air over there, did you?
No.
Nor near the dumpster where this car was for 3 days.
Correct.
Now, the samples that you took on August 29th, they were not air samples that, actually, let me rephrase that. Mr. Sigmund took the samples on the 23rd, correct? Of July.
Yes.
And then on August 29th, you attempted to get what are called control samples.
I don't understand that question. No, I don't think that's correct. No.
You attempted to get samples of various different environments, not just the car.
Correct.
So you could compare the sample from the forensic bay garage versus the car.
I can't compare it, no.
That was the purpose of you collecting air samples from the forensic bay of the garage, was it not?
I don't,
Let me rephrase this.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can help you. I apologize for the question. The forensic bay air from your garage, it's not an item of evidence in this case.
the forensics bay air that I collected
Yeah.
is evidence.
Okay. There's no dispute in fact or anything having to do with the air from your garage at the forensics bay.
There's no dispute. I don't understand what you mean.
Maybe let me see if I can rephrase it to see if I help you. The reason you took sample from the air of the forensic bay and from the car and then also from the garbage is that you could compare, so others could compare the difference in the air from one location to the other, right?
I wouldn't say difference. I think what the tests were conducted for, to see what was in the air at that particular location, like what was in the air in the garage, what was in the air in the trunk, and what was in the air in the trash.
Right. So that way you can have a better indication as to whether the air from the garage made it into the trunk and vice versa.
Correct. Okay.
Okay. That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Okay. Now, but the problem is you took this on August 29th, correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't take it on you didn't take it on June 16th.
Correct.
You didn't take it on July 15th when you first got the car.
Correct.
It was done a month and a half later
Correct.
for air that is free flowing.
Correct.
So the samples that you collected are not representative of what the air was like in that car on July 15th or June 16th of 2008.
What I think was being collected for was the odor coming from the area and the items that were tested.
My question to you, sir, is it's not a representative sample of what you're trying to accomplish. Isn't that correct?
I don't understand the question.
I'm going to object. He's asking for a scientific conclusion that's outside the scope of his stated expertise at this point.
Well, objection sustained. The witness has indicated that he does not understand the question, which means the question is valid.
All right. You also sampled the garbage, correct?
Yes, an air sample was taken of the garbage.
Okay.
I'm sorry, trash.
The trash.
Correct.
Okay. We got into that yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what you did was you didn't take a sample of the trash on July 15th, right?
Correct.
You did it of August 29th.
Yes, sir.
But there was a significant difference in the trash from the 15th of July, the 16th of July to the 29th of August, correct?
There was a what?
There was a significant difference.
There could have been.
Okay. In fact,
I wouldn't be able to tell because I didn't test it on the 16th. So I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the 16th and the 28th when I tested.
but there was something done to the trash when you got it on the 16th, right?
I didn't get it on the 16th.
Okay, the 17th of July. Let me start from the top. You got the trash in the forensics department on July 16th, 2008.
Okay.
And that trash was then taken to a dry room, was it not?
I don't know if it was immediately taken to the dry room or not.
Okay. I'd like to show you Defense Exhibit C, if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Now, without showing this to the jury, unfortunately, this is not admitted into evidence, sir. The photograph on the left shows how the garbage was when you received it, correct?
I can't answer that. I wasn't there when it was received.
Does that look like the garbage when you first saw it?
It does look like the trash, yes.
And the photograph on the right is after it was placed in the dry room, is it not?
I can't answer that question. That's not a dry room. That's being, to me, it looks like it's being laid out to be inspected.
Do you see a significant difference between the trash on the left and the trash on the right?
Of course.
And what's the purpose of putting trash in the dry room?
I didn't put it in the dry room. You'll have to ask Gerardo Blasi, who put it in the dry room, what his purpose, what his reason was.
But you're a supervisor, right?
Correct?
And you have experience in crime scene investigation, do you not?
Yes.
What would be the purpose of putting trash in a dry room?
Either storage or drying.
Okay. Either to store it or to dry it?
Correct.
Okay. And when you took the samples of air for the trash, it had already been in the dry room.
Yes.
Okay. So, and it would not have had the moisture or the same odor that it had back on July 16th.
I can't answer that.
Your common knowledge, would it tell you, sir?
It's possible.
Let me finish the question. Your common knowledge.
I'm going to object. He's asking him to speculate.
Let him finish asking the question. Sir, do not answer the question until I tell you to answer. Question.
Your common knowledge of being a human being that has trash and has dealt with trash all your life, I'm sure you've thrown it out a few times, right?
Correct.
Wait, don't answer the question, sir, until I instruct you to answer the question.
The odor would be significantly different if you had a wet bag of trash versus trash that was individually taken out and put in a dry room.
Objection to that one. You may answer, sir.
If the trash was wet and they placed it in a dry room to dry, yes, the smell would be different from the time it was wet and then the time when it was dry, if it was wet.
Okay. And when you took the air sample of the garbage on August 29th, the trash was dry.
That's possible.
Can you look at your report and see what the trash was stored in at that time?
The trash was stored in a brown box,
A brown box like one of these, cardboard box.
brown cardboard box with tape all the way around it, correct?
And it wasn't moist and wet and damp, was it?
No, it was not.
Now, you testified that and I'm showing the witness Defense Exhibit E. You testified, sir, that you collected this trash can? I'm sorry, this gas can.
Yes, sir, I did.
It's Saturday. I apologize, sir.
May counsel lay a predicate that that's the same photograph as the introduced photograph?
I would be more than happy to do that, sir.
Okay.
This is the same photograph that you took that's been admitted into evidence, is it not, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got this gas can, it's metal,
Yes, sir.
and it appears to also have some, I guess, some gas dripping on the side a little bit.
It was completely dry.
Okay, can I show it to you and
Sure.
maybe get a closer look?
Yes?
Pointing right below the duct tape that appears to be a shining area. Does that appear to you in any way to be some either wet or slightly drying gas?
It was not a wet can. That might be a stain from it being there prior and drying, but it was not, there was no gas in that can that I remember.
And you processed this entire can for prints,
Correct.
and it didn't have any fingerprints, did it?
No, it did not.
So it's possible somebody wiped this down for fingerprints?
I'm going to object with speculation.
Sustain.
Do you know or do you have any indication as to whether this can was wiped down to clear someone's fingerprints before turning it over to you?
Objection, he's asking him to speculate.
Sustain.
There are some indications that you can see, sir, when processing an item for fingerprints as to whether it's been wiped down. Isn't that correct, sir?
On occasions, yes.
Okay. Were you able to identify as to whether anybody had attempted to wipe down this particular piece of evidence before turning it over to you?
It did not appear to me to be wiped down,
But it certainly did not contain anyone's fingerprints.
and that's possible. That's correct.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
Very few questions. The gas can that you just testified about was handed to you by someone, correct?
It was actually pointed out, and I retrieved it.
Okay. Did you collect it yourself using gloves?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And when you took possession of it, do you carry it by its handle?
That's the way you normally carry the gas can.
The vehicle in question, the Sunfire, where was it stored between July 16th and the end of August when you took those samples that you testified about?
It was secured at our office in our garage.
Same location the entire time?
Yes, ma'am.
Was the odor in the vehicle the same between July 15th and when you took those samples at the end of August?
Yes, ma'am, there still was a strong odor on the vehicle.
Okay. Had it diminished in any way, to your recollection?
Not that I recall.
The items that we're referring to as trash, those items were handled by Gerardo Bloisy,
Yes, ma'am, they were.
photographed by him, not you?
Correct.
Do you have knowledge as to whether or not the garbage was stored separately from the car the entire time?
Yes, it was.
That's all I wanted to follow up with. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any additional questions on the area that was just covered? Okay, may the witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may be excused, sir, subject to recall.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the time is now approximately 8 minutes to the hour of 1. I don't necessarily think we have an 8-minute witness. Okay. Okay, we're going to recess for today and reconvene in this matter on Monday at 9 a.m. I have worked out the kinks as far as restaurant number 1. It'll be one day, hopefully next week in the evening. And as soon as I get some additional information, I will see if I'm able to work out the kinks on restaurant number 2. Okay? Oh, okay. I think things should work out for the hamburgers, though. Did they? You don't know yet? Okay. I'll see can I find out before I leave today. Okay, see you on Monday morning. Yeah, you may be seated. Okay, folks, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
This is just an issue that has arisen. We have a consultant as it relates to some of the computer issues, and we would like permission at this point to exempt Sandy Osborne and Kevin Stanger from the rule for the rule of sequestration for the limited purpose of discussing the evidence with us and the consultant.
Mr. Baez?
This is not someone who will testify, but there are just some issues that we wanted to address prior to their testimony, and they've certainly been deposed. The evidence, the hard drive's been turned over, and rather than violate the rule of sequestration by having the witness talk to somebody else about their testimony, seeking the court's permission just to permit the inquiry for that limited purpose.
Are you referring to a consultant that is not on the witness list?
Yes.
We certainly would object to that, Judge.
On what basis?
If I'm hearing, and which is always a question, and trying to read at the same time, you're asking to have a new consultant to review with your, what are you asking, Linda? I didn't quite get it. I'm sorry, Mr. Ranger.
I have a consultant assisting me on some issues that are work product. In order to deal with that, the consultant will need to also have access to the listed witnesses. Since the rule's been invoked, that would prohibit the witness from discussing their testimony with anyone besides the attorneys. What I would like to do is have the court allow us, for that limited purpose of any consultation that I have with this person, that I could have the three-way conversation rather than relaying it down the grapevine.
You're not intending this person being a witness?
Nope.
I would have no concern about that. However, we may want to have a brief deposition of that person, or our own interview with them,
No.
What person?
to discover what they're trying to, well, never mind, that'd be a work product issue.
Yeah.
Sorry, you won't catch me.
A month ago, I wouldn't have had to ask the court's permission, but there are some other issues that,
Okay.
We don't object.
Okay. The rule, as we all know, is designed to prevent the coloring of testimony. And technically that would have been a violation, but you did the proper thing in seeking permission. Permission is granted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, anything else, folks?
Indeed, that the rest of the rule be invoked. I find it extraordinary that the trash and garbage humor came in the day after yesterday.
I'm lost.
This last witness talked about calling it trash instead of garbage after yesterday's deal, and it's supposed to be under rule of sequestration, not talking to Gerardo Gloisy. That's a huge coincidence. I just ask that everybody understand the rule is invoked. They're required to instruct.
Well, it is what it is. If there's an allegation of violation of the rule, then I hear evidence of such. But it's a interesting dichotomy when folks call garbage trash and other folks call trash garbage. And as Mr. Baez pointed out, people use that phrase interchangeably. To some folks it's garbage, to some folks it's trash, and only the good Lord knows what the third connotation would be. Refuge. And some folks may call it waste management. Okay, anything else, folks? I have one brief matter at 8:30 Monday, but it will not be in here. It will be in my hearing room. Are you going to do that? It's status hearing on the state of Florida versus Lionel Miller for purposes of his 3851 post-conviction relief motion, which I don't think any of y'all are involved in that. Okay, we'll be in recess to 9 a.m. Monday morning.